try another home, home essay here concerning the tragic philosophy, as far as I can see, of Friedrich Nietzsche, the man with 5 consonants in a row. You know what I'm saying? As human beings, one and all, we see life through personal perspective, although, of course, each person's own perspective is certainly influenced by the perspective of others, especially in a psychological super-ego framework. But regardless, one views life living through the mask of illusion. One's perspective, a most vital tool necessary for living in the first place. Yet occasionally, and more often than rarely, does one's mask come off, dissolve, disappear. Certainty gives way to the unknown. Understanding is undermined. Reality is broken up, and ego barriers remove themselves. And a seemingly simultaneous upheaval of great emotional impact, containing elements of terror and joy, by which the initiate into the mystery absolves himself of himself, relinquishes ego control, and breaks on through to the other side of living. In this realm, dreams awake and music dances on flames of temperament. It is most certainly all too much for our senses, who now know no limits, all too much for our thought and feeling, now charged and melded together, producing sparks of imagery and music, transcending time and space. One is in the moment, in the energy, is here, now, is everything. A refocusing, a relearning, a new perspective, a different mask now develops. An amorphed human being rises from the decay of the old perspective, accompanied by a Dionysian consciousness which has torn away the mask, exposing oneself to the abyss and peak, the ebb and flow, the coming and going of life, of living, of oneself, and the return, the recircle, the rebirth, the eternal recurrence of life becoming itself. It appears these two elements, if I may abstract such thoughts, the masked person and the unmasked, that is, the person viewing life through his perspective, and the same individual without this perspective, and thus naturally and necessarily propelled into the world of Dionysian chaos, this person, you and me, the one masked and or unmasked, is ultimately one and the same. This helps demonstrate the power of perspective, the necessity for perspective, which shapes one's world, giving it meaning for a time. It is inevitable that one's perspective must change, either grow or decay. In any event, the Dionysian interlude, the dance upon the dissolution of one's ego, which includes the destruction of one's most cherished perspective, one's worldview, one's reason for living, destroyed through the ritualistic and sometimes completely spontaneous unmasking of one's human perspective, this event, this shattering, this breaking of perspective, ironically infuses the new and unfolding perspective with emotive power, with feeling, with passion, that now forms this content, this living human emotional content, into a different framework, a newly created perspective, which hopefully is fuller and richer and deeper, a perspective of growth, of change, of becoming more human, becoming more oneself. Now the mask takes in more territory, is more soulful, more aware of this tremendous process, this masking and unmasking and masking again. Ironically, one is more conscious of these unconscious processes. One is more intuitively aware, in tune with the music, the dance, and the song of human living, which continually and renewably alters its outlook, its knowledge, its truth, for a glimpse, a remembrance into the past, present, and future of human existence. As frightening as disintegration appears, as frightening as it is it is as enlightening. For chaos prepares the path to order, to perspective, to knowing, to security in oneself, in one's beliefs and values. Chaos forces humankind to form this violent, dark, unknowable part of existence, this fertile ground for expansion, for growth in human potentiality, into a working, seeing, doing perspective, enabling the creation out of such a knowing, a world one can now come to know and relate to as a world that is true. But we must start to see, to incorporate into our worldview, that one creates this true world, this world out of necessity, born from the human reaction-action which occurs during the masking-unmasking process, a process which ironically utilizes destruction, annihilation of the very thing one needs to live, a perspective, in order to form a new perspective, hopefully, and a better working perspective which can allow for this process to occur, because it will. In human culture, today, it manifests as madness, as insanity, as psychosis. But we are neurotic because we, as a culture, allow for practically no outlets for the formation of the breakdown and rebuilding of perspective. This human process, which is vital to growth, is feared, producing neurosis as coping mechanisms for the inevitable. Change, and more change. Religion, as well as logic and scientific thinking, can try and thwart the process, as with religion as it attempts to exorcise one from such Dionysian states, cut one off from oneself, in essence, in order to save oneself from oneself, so that someday one can be freed from all of this and return to peace and quiet and comfort in heaven. But does it work that way? Cutting off ourselves from ourselves, literally castrating one's passion in order to keep oneself intact, keeping oneself viewing life from the same perspective, which in part evolves a worldview which dictates generally to one and all under its spell what life is and how to act and behave accordingly? This is all well and good for a time until cracks and anomalies start appearing in our group mask, in our individual masks, which eventually lead to the breakdown of perspective. But this is healthy. It is fundamental to human beingness, to human becomingness. This is a creative process which includes the constructive and the destructive side of life, enabling the formation of perspective to come about, to be born, to be created in the first instance. Letting go is the gateway to growth. Fear will always accompany this growth process, but one's courage to take heart and learn to laugh at oneself, learn to dance over oneself despite and in the midst of such monstrous energy as this world beholds.